Steve Penchina, before we get your views on the state of advertising today, can you talk about the creative aspect when you, quote, wrote this shit?
Yes, of course. When I started out, it was very different than Mad Men that we see on TV. The whole focus was on the creative product and execution. I mean, what is the idea about, as they used to say in an old commercial in my era, you know, where's the beef? What is this really about? And importantly, we were involved and we were focused on what we called conceptual advertising. Advertising with an idea, not just execution. I'm afraid to say that today I see a lot of advertising that's execution-oriented and not concept-oriented. And that's very different than when I was starting out. When I was starting out, the big cheese was Bill Bernbach of Doyle Dane Bernbach, and he was the one who broke all the rules and came up with, like for Volkswagen, he came up with, Lemon and Think Small and Avis, We Try Harder, things like that.
But what goes into a campaign? Because there's more than just a greet tagline. You have to think about how you're going to mount the attack, right?
Right, you're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of a pet peeve with me, because I think the very first thing you have to do when you mount a campaign is you have to come up with a strategy. A strategy is like a blueprint. What is this thing all about? What is it you want to convey? What is the story you need to convey? Once you have that down and you adhere to that, you don't veer off that, once you have that strategy down, then you could sit back and say, okay, how can I make it funny? How can I make it interesting? How could I do this? How could I do that?
And how do you make sure it highlights the product and it's not just advertising guys who want to come up with some clever phrases?
Good question. If it's humor, for example, if it's a humorous thing, I always say that the humor has to come out of the product. It shouldn't just be, pull it out of thin air and let's make something funny. It should come out of the product and what the product does. So
it can't just be trying to get a joke out there.
No.
You got to bring it all back to the product.
Right. It shouldn't just be a joke out there, because the consumer is smart. They'll figure it out. They'll say, well, why is this? Why'd you put that in there? What is that? And not only that, but if the humor comes out of the product or out of the strategy or out of the idea of the commercial, people will buy it. People will understand it.
And what if you miss? I know when you watch Mad Men, when they miss in terms of an advertising campaign, Don Draper would drink heavily. But tell me, how do you keep a client when something doesn't work out? Because you don't always bat 1,000.
True. When I miss, I cry a lot. And however, the client doesn't. When I miss, the client is very upset. And, after all, they're putting a lot of money in, not only in the creative execution, but they're putting a lot of money in the media. Millions upon millions of dollars in the media. And if we miss, the client's not happy.
And what about technology? Is it making it easier for today's advertisers because they can get things out quicker and bigger? Or is it harder because you're going to miss, but you're going to miss much quicker?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's also something that I've been thinking about and is in the book, which is technology. The Mac, for example, was invented to help us as a tool. It was really invented to help us in execution. How could we edit faster? How could we edit better? How could we come up with dazzling executions? But what I think has happened in today's world, what has happened is that the computer has actually veered us off course because we're now involved much more in the execution of something and not the idea of something. Just sit home and watch TV one night and see all these car commercials, and they all look alike. They all seem alike, and you don't know what it is until the end of the commercial.
Finally, you work with Howard Stern. Is it
Yes.
still possible to offend anybody nowadays? Because it seems as though every line has been crossed.
Right. It's hard to. The short answer is it's hard to offend people nowadays because it's all been out there. Howard blazed the trail, Don Imus blazed the trail, all these comedians. I work with Rodney Dangerfield. He was out there making fun of everybody. Years ago, it was easier. It was easier to offend people. Today, much harder.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Steve.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching The Street.